2025 has been deemed the year of the AI agent, and we're sick of it. We're not there yet. And we'll just start with a couple of those claims because agents, as they've been defined by the AI providers, Anthropic has a great discussion happening as they're a thought leader in the space of what is an AI agent and what is not an AI agent that people often confuse.
Welcome to the Tourism AI Network, where we talk about all things at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. Today, Josh Houston and I are talking about, I think, what is a very topical topic, which is traditional large language models, reasoning models, and AI agents. And I want to preface this conversation with, if you go online, you listen to kind of the AI community, everybody's all excited about agents, AI agents, and so we'll talk a bit about what that means. But the reality is that I think we're not there yet, and certainly a lot of people are using the word agent in a lot of different ways, and they're not really truly agents. And so there's a lot of confusion in the market again. So we're going to try to cut through the noise a little bit. We're going to kind of talk about each of these different types of models or types of AI, I suppose, and kind of where we're at today, maybe how we use some of them, and where we see things going. So I'm going to maybe start off with saying that I don't know, it was last year sometime, there was a leaked document on OpenAI's path to artificial general intelligence. And in that path to artificial general intelligence, it had like 5 different steps. That was sort of their kind of way to define how OpenAI is progressing on this path to this artificial general intelligence. And just as a reminder to everybody, artificial general intelligence is sort of loosely defined as a point in time at which AI will be as capable or more capable than humans at every economically viable task. That's kind of the way I like to define it. So just to kind of give some context to this conversation, to frame it a little bit, the first step on the ladder to artificial general intelligence is chatbots. And so think about, ChatGPT or, Claude's traditional AI model, or Google's Gemini model. So kind of those main things that we all know of as sort of generative artificial intelligence tools. The next step that they call is what they call reasoners. And so these are what we call these reasoning models. And we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. The next step is what we call agents. And then there's a couple other steps beyond that we're not going to get into today. So I think it's an important context in when we start to talk about, the agentic world we're living in. That's really a next step in a pretty significant path on the direction towards artificial general intelligence. And really, reasoning models just came out sort of towards the end of last year, and over Christmas or soon into the new year, ChatGPT, as an example, came out with like their second version of their reasoning model, which is pretty awesome, called O3. So just wanted to give that context to frame this conversation out a little bit. Josh, maybe I'll start with a couple questions for you. First of all, let's just start with the agents conversation and sort of put that one to bed, so we can actually focus the rest of our time on cutting through the noise and talking about how we use the two, general large language models and then reasoning models, which is really where I think most people need to spend their effort right now in terms of understanding. So let's talk about agents, talk about where they're at, and maybe then remove them from this conversation.
Yeah,
So Josh, kind
totally.
of tell us what your thoughts are on the state of agents today.
Absolutely. Well, agents are getting a ton of press this year. 2025 has been deemed the year of the AI agent. Um, and we're sick of it. We're not there yet. And we'll just start with a couple of those claims because agents, as they've been defined by the AI providers. So Anthropic has a great discussion happening as they're a thought leader in the space of what is an AI agent and what is not an AI agent that people often will confuse. AI agents, as they define it, is an AI model that you would talk to ask to do something that has a goal where we don't actually know how many actions or steps it's going to take to complete that goal. So when you talk to an AI agent, which is very, very rare, there's only a few out there on the market right now, there's no knowing how long it's going to take, how many tokens it's going to eat, what tools it's going to actually use. It's open-ended. With AI agents, the promise is that they will be autonomous. And currently there are 0 autonomous AI agents. Some semi-autonomous or semi-automatic agents that we know of is OpenAI's Operator, which can open a browser in front of you as a human with you to go to the internet and start poking around in a web browser. And we call that semi-automatic because to get anything done, that agent is going to ping you while it's going to solve for CAPTCHAs, to help with payment, to do signups, because it's not actually capable of doing those things automatically. So semi-automatic agents are here in their very crude first version. Like this is in beta right now. So when people make claims, big bold claims about AI agents are taking over, what they're referring to is what Anthropic would just define as AI workflows, where you create an automation flow, you add some components of AI, like a prompt call and response, and you allow an AI model to select this tool to use. So it's, once again, a semi-automatic flow where you have a user talking to an AI. That's not automatic because there's a manual person involved. And that AI can trigger what we call, and what is called tool use, where it could then select a tool out of its tool belt that it's been given access to and it's been programmed by developers to use, to then follow a predefined workflow. And that is a predefined workflow where we know the number of steps, we know what's going to happen, we know where the outcome is going to be, and it is not automatic. So by and large, that's 99% of what people are calling AI agents right now is AI workflows. It would serve the whole world a lot better if people just referred to these things with the right lingo, to confuse non-techies and to not confuse everybody. But that's the goal. If you're trying to sell snake oil, if you're trying to capitalize on the hype, you use these terms interchangeably. I remember having plenty of discussions last year when we were talking with clients, with colleagues, and some of them were just electing to use, we're just going to call everything AI agents because clients don't know the difference between automation without AI. They don't know the difference between prompt chains. They don't know prompt engineering. They don't know any of the engineering stuff happening here. So we'll just say it's AI agents and we'll move on. So anyways, there's only a couple agents that currently exist in their beta form. There's Use Computer by Anthropic, which is similar to Operator, but was released months and months ago. Then there's Operator, and pretty much everything else on the market is a workflow so far, or it's like a test or something that's not made it to production. Like when we have AI agents and they are widespread, those agents will live in our smartphones. They'll be super trustworthy. We'll all be, kind of sitting back, like enjoying the benefit of having AI that's actually helpful in the wild. But right now, like, does your smartphone assistant, I'm not going to say their names because they'll start listening and talking to us right now, do they actually have the capability to help you like the claims?
Yeah,
No.
Yeah.
So that's where agents are at.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll just say that I think that, to your point, the conversation around AI agents is so not useful for regular people just trying to learn AI. And, it's really developer, like in order to even create something that's looks and feels like a semi-autonomous AI agent, or, using, even I listened to a bunch of podcasts last year, a couple of developers that were playing around with Anthropic's computer use, and they were having fun with it and it was all fun, but even they were saying like this is so far away from anything that's useful. It's really
Right.
just a toy for now, right? And so again, I hear from people all the time that are like, hey, can you set me up with some AI agents, or can you do, and it's like just learn how to use ChatGPT, like learn how to use basic AI tools, because we're not there yet. And quite frankly, they're very complicated to build. They're very expensive to build properly. It takes a lot of development time, and none of that is useful, right? At all. So I wouldn't mind, Josh, if we kind of, I guess, talked a little bit about intelligent automations and where that fits into the scheme of things. And then we'll kind of move on to back to the basic topic that we were planning to talk about.
Totally. Well, if you rewind like 3 years ago, by and large, most companies weren't even thinking about automation. Like automation has been around for decades, right? No code automation has been popular for the past decade or so. But most companies haven't actually taken the time to map out their workflows and find automation and integrate the different work apps that they use, because it's just not been something that was talked about much, right? And it didn't have hype. It missed its whole, like, in the age of the cell phone, the cell phone took over more than automation, like that. Mobile design and mobile UI and mobile apps like have been the focus for business applications, and not automation. With AI, this question of automation started oddly coming up like they were the two in one, but it's not because that's what they actually are. It's because that's what people's perception is. Like when someone hears AI, they think something happened automatically for me. So automation is now in its heyday. I would say there's a ton of no code platforms that make it really easy to connect business apps. And within those automation workflows, it's very common now for people to leverage AI models to help smooth out those processes. So where it used to be, where there used to be blockers that needed a developer to come in and write a bunch of code to help basically determine which path the workflow should take. Now you can use an AI to determine which path, and it can, because it can serve with a little bit of intelligence that workflow, like you can do that much more efficiently with AI than traditionally having to wire up all that with a programmer. So where a lot of companies are seeing benefits is they're learning how to use the basics of AI, and this is where we try to encourage folks, like, if you can learn your ChatGPT experience, that'll give you a good idea of what AI can help with, because whatever you go back to over and over again is proving that it's working, right? Once you have some proven use cases for you and your business, these are things worth exploring to ask these questions about autonomous or intelligent automations, where we could put those same prompts that you're going to back, the same context you keep referencing to, in most cases, it's writing tasks to help you draft this same writing file faster and consistently. And that's generally the step we take when someone goes from ChatGPT to something becoming an automation, is we find there's enough volume to justify the investment. There's an opportunity to save someone some real amount of time, hours and hours a week at minimum. And therefore we can go down this path. But for most people, automation hasn't ever been something they think about, because we're used to serving in our jobs the purpose of moving information around, of typing and copying and pasting and making sure systems are in sync. So I think it's something that we actually do a lot more automation work right now than AI work. Funny enough, like when we sell an automation, it's 90+% automation and then 10% AI. And people don't really understand that. We help them understand it through the process. We just show, we don't necessarily need AI to do 100% of this work. It needs to do the parts that the automation struggles with, and vice versa. We'll have the automation do the parts that AI would struggle with.
Yeah.
So it's a
And
lot
what I
more,
like,
I would say. Go ahead.
yeah, what I was gonna say is what I like kind of how to think about this is, the automation is just sort of a, kind of a set of tools that sort of ties a bunch of things together, right? And so maybe the AI is somewhere in the middle of that set of tools. So it could take this document and this process, use the AI to kind of, do a thing, and then maybe, and move that into a different document or different process or
Mhm.
different tool, right? So that's really it's just really like to me, it's just a tool that ties a bunch of things together. And the AI
Exactly.
might just be one of those things that's in sort of in the workflow that it's tying together, right? And
Yep.
so really, and that's what makes it an intelligent automation, because maybe, you have a set of instructions for the AI to follow that takes this information, that information, follows these instructions, creates an output, and then maybe sort of takes that output and puts it into this kind of document or this kind of format or this whatever, right? So that's sort of just a very basic way to kind of explain it in the way I understand it.
Totally.
And again, to me, that's great, and that's definitely something I think that could be of value, much more value to many more companies than thinking about agents. But now, taking a step back, I think the real conversation that people need to be thinking about and having, and something that I've been actually baking now into my Intro to Generative AI course that I'm just updating right now, is, traditional large language models and then reasoning models. And because, the reasoning models all of a sudden really significantly change the way AI can be used. And actually, to me, Josh, they actually are the step towards intelligent automation, the step towards agents, right? There's still, even for agents to work properly, there are still steps that need to be taken before we can get there. And so to me, this is like a progression over time. Just as the technology progresses, we need to update our workflows, we need to update our context briefs, we need to update our standard operating procedures, we need to document things properly, we need to save things properly, right? We need to organize things properly. Because if we do all of those things well, that'll just make the intelligent automations work better. That'll make the agents work better in the future, right? So let's just talk a little bit about, first of all, maybe why don't you kind of give me your definition of a large language model versus a reasoning model, loosely, and then we can sort of talk through maybe how we each use both of them.
Yeah, totally. So from a non-technical standpoint, talking to any, we'll just say generic LLM, large language model, without reasoning capabilities is going to be a call and response, right? It's a simple chat where I ask a question, it gives me a response that it thinks is the best next word. times however many words it thinks it needs to fulfill what I've asked for. That's been, and the intelligence level that you would expect there is not like a PhD, right? You're talking to like a really helpful and excitable like high school or early college level intern that has very specific and deep knowledge about very specific things that the internet knows a lot about, right? That's kind of the way I package it. Reasoners are different. They're problem solvers first, and so before they respond back to you, they actually have an inner dialogue that they'll print and show in all the models now. So if you're talking to say ChatGPT 3 mini on your ChatGPT account, you're going to notice that it actually kind of calls out where it's at in the thought process before it actually responds to you. And this reasoning process is just it applying some logic before its response. So like in the same way, someone who's intelligent that is well spoken would like pause, think, and then speak. Not everybody does that, and myself included. The AI models that are reasoners will do that because they're going through what's called a chain of thought, where it's explaining its thought process first for its own purposes. It's making a plan ultimately with that chain of thought to solve whatever it is you've put in front of it. So it's applying a lot more logic. And in terms of the difference of performance, I think that's been the like it's like a very, it feels like a big step up in quality. The main reason is because you're still like with non-reasoning models, you're still talking to a model that can score like genius level IQ, but the way that it's serving that intelligence to you has not been in the most like, I would say, helpful or capable way at times. Reasoners unlock more of that more often because of that moment of thought, and it'll tell you, I thought for 7 seconds, I thought for 20 seconds, I thought for 2 minutes. It'll tell you how much reasoning it's been doing based off of its thought process. And this is solving a lot of, it's changing the way we prompt. It's changing the way automations happen. Like we can talk about that here in plenty of detail, just because of the capability increase. But I would love, Peter, you said you're having to go back to the drawing board in some ways, or you're going back and evolving some of your instructions and some of your how-to guides for your staff and some of your clients. Can you talk about your initial impressions? Because we've had reasoners for like a month or so at this point. It'd be fascinating to hear how it's changing, Tourism AI Network team.
Sure, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I like to, again, just to kind of make this make sense for people in terms of analogies, is so the analogy I've been kind of using a little bit more of now is like, I really think about a large language model. I have in my intro to AI for tourism professionals, an analogy of a librarian. So, so let's just talk about, first of all, let's go Google, large language model, and then a reasoning model. So Google, you'd go to the library and you'd say, hey, I'm looking for a book on, destination development. And the librarian would say, okay, well, over there in that section is our tourism section. And, there's a bunch of books over there that are on topics related to destination development. You got to go look through those books and you got to go find what you're looking for, right? So think about, you go to Google, traditional Google, I should say, and it gives you 10 blue links or, whatever. Now it's like sort of like scroll forever links, but you go through and then you have to go through the links, you have to do your research, you have to look through all of them. That is sort of similar to like a traditional library experience. A large language model, on the other hand, is the librarian's pretty much read every single book in the library and knows everything that's in all of those books and can kind of just tell you the answer you're looking for, right? Whereas a reasoning model is like a problem solving strategist. So it's going to say, okay, well, what is it you're trying to solve? Let me help you through that. Let's take it step by step and sort of go through a process to sort of, kind of go through and actually help you solve a problem. So, it's kind of like, well, why are you looking for that book? What problem are you trying to solve? Let's go through the steps to solve that problem, right? So I think that's just a good analogy, right, to kind of think through this. And I really like to tell my staff that, first of all, reasoning models actually need less detail. And from what I've been kind of experimenting is actually less detail works better because the way I'm trying to teach my staff now with these new reasoning models is start with the reasoning model, right? It's the thinking model, and just kind of give it broad based questions or broad based problems you're trying to solve without giving it too much detail, and then work with the reasoning model to sort of get down to something more specific based on what you're looking for. That's sort of how so it's like you're working with you're working with like a senior consulting, really experienced senior consultant and strategic consultant, right? And it's like, okay, well, what problems are you trying to solve? And literally what I've been directing my staff and what I do in training is like, okay, say, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. What do you need to do to help me solve that problem? Step one. And the reasoning model will actually do an incredible job saying, okay, here's everything I would need. and then you start answering its questions, right? And then you start going back and forth. So it's like thinking about like, okay, you just hired a very senior consultant and to help you solve a sales problem, let's say. Well, the first thing the consultant's going to do is start asking you a bunch of questions, right? And trying to understand and get to the root of your problem, and then advise you, along the way. The traditional large language model like ChatGPT 4.0 is more like the worker, right? It's more of the junior level worker, needs a lot of context, needs a lot of detail, needs specifics. So, it's kind of, I use the analogy of, imagine you have somebody starting to work for you, and you're preparing your training to set them up for success. So what context do they need? Where are the files that they need to find the information, right? What are the standard operating procedures they need to do to solve the problem, right? What does a good output look like? So obviously it needs more information, but it's much more of a tool to use to get into the nitty-gritty details. It's faster, right? It's cheaper to use. So, right? So you wouldn't necessarily, okay, now that your senior strategist has helped you develop a strategy, you're going to probably use your junior team member to help you kind of develop and execute the strategy. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. I don't know, Josh, does that align with kind of the way you think about this?
Pretty closely, yeah. I think the main thing we consider when we're working with reasoning models is that they do a good job with all of the context and what they need less. So we've actually been adding more context for them because they have really high windows of like understanding content. Like 200,000 tokens can be added to a thread, and it can handle and manage that information more effectively than the other reasoning or the other non-reasoning models. That's the main difference I think between what you're saying and where we're at. The Where we are similar is the instructions in the prompt much less rigid, much less detailed, much less in like just length and information there, because the reasoner is able to solve a lot more of the logic pieces that we don't have to infer, versus when we worked with non-reasoning models, we actually tell them exactly what to think about. We tell them the steps. Step one, think about this. Step two,
Right.
because of that, now write this. Step three, now think about that. And we had to like go through defining its chain of thought, and we don't do that for reasoners. Reasoners can think on their own, and best practice is to let them be open-ended. So getting the thing done is more open-ended because we just give it the goal, and then we give it all the information, as much information as possible, and it can handle that information much better and then get to an answer that's like, I mean, we've seen mind-blowing stuff. Like I saw a 26 page, like my ChatGPT wrote a 26 page legal document the other day, and I keep coming back to this. It took me one prompt to have it do that, and it was like a 10-page paste of annotations from my notes about this document before.
Right.
So I took all those notes, which was like way overkill, right? Extra writing that I would have done to like, kick it back to my attorney. But because the AI needed some more context, I just gave it that. And then it took all of that with my one prompt. My prompt was a sentence. It said, can you help me draft a better version of this based off of these notes? Paste, enter. And then it was able to produce 26 pages, because it was able to think through all of that.
Yeah. And so so I know that Josh, obviously you've been pretty deep into the AI space for a while, and as an agency that's been sort of helping companies with AI adoption,
Mm-hmm.
for example, somebody says, "Hey, can you build me a tool that does X, Y, and Z?" Previously, what your, company would do and your team would do is actually go through a process of chain of thought reasoning, or go through a couple different sort of techniques, if you will, on how
Mm-hmm.
to get a traditional large language model to do the thing, right? And
Yep.
am I correct to say that now those techniques have basically built baked into the model, and now it can do many of those things kind of on your behalf? And so what it does effectively is it makes sort of the techniques that you guys have been using more accessible to a regular sort of
Definitely.
normie or normal user, right? Is that a fair way to kind of describe what the reasoning models mean for your average everyday user?
Yeah, I think for the everyday user, the level of skill needed to prompt is much less. So what we focus on for the last like 6 months, really, we've been encouraging folks, instead of becoming like a prompt wizard. That's kind of like, there was this magical like realm that people described, like people who could massage the AI right in the right way to get what they want. We need less prompt wizards, and we need more people who are organized, professional, like people that know how to like load the right files into their chat GPT.
Right.
That's really the skill we're focused on now, is helping people with that. We call it AI intuition. Like,
Yeah.
how how will you determine which files to add and what context to provide? If
Right.
that's actually the hardest part now, because the reasoner doesn't need you to type out a prompt that's 20 paragraphs, and it doesn't need the help me Obi-Wan, you're my only hope prompt hack. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, they don't need these like workarounds. And those workarounds, like, they worked for specific models. That was the non-scalable, like, slow burn that we knew, like, a lot of these tactics would become more obsolete over time, much like a lot of the skills that were early days in like learning how to use computers before mouses and keyboards. Like,
Hmm.
people who spent time learning keyboard shortcuts because there wasn't a mouse when that was the computer they had in the early days. Like, those people are really fast at using computers still. Like, they still, like, those shortcuts still exist, but like, not everybody needs to know them in order to use the computer. And that's an analogy that we really think is worth leaning on, because like, I had a couple coworkers who, like, when I first started my career, were still like this. They're like, I didn't have a mouse when I started, Josh, like, screw I'd always make fun, or we'd poke fun at them, like, hey, why aren't you touching your mouse? Like, they're like,
Right.
just typing away and things are
It's
happening. I'm like,
inefficient to go and move my hand off the keyboard,
it's
right?
awesome. Like, it's super cool to think about, but I'm like, I would never sit there and like learn all that, because I'm not a programmer, so I don't need those shortcuts for programming either. But yeah, in the same way, people that are learning AI now, and learning how, they just want, hey, I want the AI to help me. Well, you don't have to explain to the AI how it should think about stuff. You should just explain how you think about stuff. You should explain what matters to you, what the goal is, and the AI will do those heavy lifting pieces that were heavy lifting. Only even 6 to 12 months ago.
Yeah. And I should just maybe mention that, a couple things also that these reasoning models are particularly good at that actually large language models were not good at, and specifically large language models were not good at solving math problems. And so now these reasoning models actually are way better at solving math problems. I mean, I'm not an advanced mathematician or anything like that, but for the basic kind of math that I would need it for, I would say they're pretty much bang on and they can get it right every single time. And what's cool too is, again, you give it some kind of math problem and it actually shows you the step-by-step kind of approach it takes to solving the math problem, which is super cool. So now that also unlocks the ability to do really interesting data analysis or really interesting financial analysis on your company, or right. And like that really unlocks a lot. And then the other thing they're good at is like coding, or much better at is like coding. So, I think we're getting to a place now where these tools can literally, you know, code and build you tools in real time, and tell it
Definitely.
literally give you the code to like create a tool, which is super cool. And then just kind of going beyond that a little bit, one, I have just kind of some things here. So step-by-step decision making, which is really useful. I also tell my team, Josh, is, when you're using an O3 model as an example, actually take the time to go through, it tells you thinking and it tells you reasoning and it's telling you, it's actually rewriting your question into its
Yep.
own prompts. And that's actually a really useful exercise to go through and read how it's re prompting your prompt and thinking through it step by step, because that actually gives you a lot of intuition in terms of how these things work, right? So it's actually a really useful tool for learning AI, I find. And then the other thing is it does reduce hallucinations in general. So hallucinations is, when the AI just makes things up, and it has the ability to kind of verify outputs and check things a little bit more. So I don't think it completely eliminates them, but it certainly makes that problem less prominent. And then just one more thing here is, it's a really, really good tool for strategic thinking and problem solving, right? And so think about any business intelligence, forecasting, high level decision making, evaluating trade offs, right? And again, what I like about it is it actually tells you its thinking process. So you can kind of look at it and be like, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense to me, or no, that doesn't make sense to me. You can challenge its assumptions. You can, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
just giving you an answer and being like, okay, well, this is the right answer, right? So it does start to feel a lot more like a strategic partner, right?
Thought.
And it's a really big deal. And one of the things I noticed in just I've done a couple presentations in the last like week on kind of AI use, and again, most people aren't even using, they're not even aware that these things exist inside their chat GPT as an example, right? And so again, people are getting all excited about agents and they're not even using the tools inside their current tool they're using. And that's kind of what is so frustrating to me about kind of the state of AI and all the hype. And so, I think our goal today is just to say, just learn how to use the tools better that would currently exist. And so, on that note, there are a couple of features that I know ChatGPT has introduced that make it more interesting. These are features that have existed, for example, in Claude's Anthropic model as well. But one of them is projects. And so, can you describe, Josh, how you would use, for example, maybe a reasoning model and then a traditional LLM in the context of setting up and using a project? Can you kind of walk us through your kind of like process there?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at which way we're going to use the AI, in this case, we make it simple for people that we work with in our coaching, focusing on ChatGPT. Like you could focus on ChatGPT, you could pick Claude. We're going to pick one. We're going to stick with that so that we don't focus on all the other stuff, right? The other stuff may or may not be relevant to the conversation at hand. So with projects, there's two components that we can configure. And some people will call it train. Configure is the right word because we're not training anything, we're just giving it information. One is the what's called the project files. You can add and upload project files, PDFs, documents, Word docs, markdown files, you name it, images, you name it. You can upload documents a to your project as you create this project that then can be referenced over and over again throughout the chats. They can be referenced directly or they can be indirectly referenced, and the AI can decide to reference them at any point too. So all it is saying, like, for this specific project, we want to think about these files, right? And we can simply upload them by pulling them from the computer, drag and drop. It's very easy, like you would upload a file anywhere. The second component is custom instructions, where you tell the AI, here's what this project's all about. Here are the files that you have access to. And that's that second part of it is one that we often find people don't think about. Like we want to give the AI a goal so that when the user goes to talk to it, everybody's on the same page about what we're working on, which saves time in the prompt. Because if you didn't use a project and you didn't have this custom prompt already built out, the custom instructions, you'd have to remind the AI every time you go to talk about it. Here's what we're working on. Here's what we're focused. Here's the context you need to know. Here's the goal. Like those are all things that you would include in a prompt so that the AI is aligned with you, right? And then when you would attach files, like if you were doing this outside of a project, you would have this big old prompt where you just tell it, here's the goal, here's what we're working on, here's what I need your help, here's what the output should be. That's how you would start your thread. And then you would add files as you go through. Here's something to think about. Let's consider this. How does this implicate that, etc. We can now just do that one time in the project folder, saving those files, saving that instruction so that every time you go to chat with it, now you can focus on just the whatever's variables. For agencies and consultants, this is really helpful because say you want to have a project that helps you write your proposals. Well, now you can have all your examples of past proposals. You can have a list of all your services. You can have a document talking about your organization, your personas, your customers, all these different things, the style of your proposal sections and how you want to write each one. Those can all be files in your project knowledge. And your custom instruction is going to sound something to the lines of, we're going to write a proposal for new leads and prospects. Every time we do this, we're going to provide context from our sales conversation with them. That'll be a transcript file. It gets uploaded by the user. The user is going to then work section by section to customize the proposal text and then move that text into our standing template document. That's like a really common custom instruction / combination of project files that instead of having to spend 5 to 10 minutes configuring your chat every single time you wanted to do a proposal, or risk having one thread in your ChatGPT profile where you have all these proposals and eventually it starts to forget all this information because you've moved past the context window. Now you can go back over and over again with this project configuration and do this a lot more quickly. It makes it way more accessible for team members who may not be that good at prompting. They can simply just tell the AI what they want, and it has as much information as possible already. Therefore, it can just do the heavy lifting for them.
I just discovered my new fun tools in the Riverside FM.
Nice.
Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate, projects are really a great way to organize things, and for me, the way I've been kind of thinking about these projects now is that, first of all, let me just sort of bring it back to the reasoning models. So the first thing I did when I started to play around with projects is I went to ChatGPT o3, the reasoning model, and I said, okay. This is my title. This is my job. These are my responsibilities. Can you tell me, can you recommend to me a set of context briefs or a set of like documents that I would use to, execute most of my job kind of thing, right? And then it sort of knew enough about kind of what a president does and what this does and what that does. And it basically made a bunch of recommendations for me, right? And then I was like, okay, And then I sort of use the model to work through all of that. And so let's just say I created, and then I was thinking about how to organize everything in terms of like each type of thing I do is a kind of a project. So for example, I'm going through and updating all of my presentations for 2025, right? And all my, workshops and everything else. And so I've created a project just for that task. And so what that allows me to do is organize my ChatGPT sort of instance in a way that it's not just a bunch of random tasks or a bunch of random prompts, but they're projects with context, with background documents and everything else. But for me, where the real magic has been actually, Josh, has been okay, so I've created this project, it's got all of these documents in it, it's got all of this context in it. Then I actually go back to GPT-3 and I say, okay, can you provide me a system prompt that allows me to use this project and use ChatGPT in the most effective way possible using these documents? And what it's been giving me is this massive, like sometimes 3-page system prompt, very detailed. And a reason I'm kind of mentioning all of this is because it starts to feel to me like a little bit of like a start of an intelligent automation inside the chat GPT. So it's like literally taking sometimes the instructions are like, okay, first do this, then
Hmm.
do this, then do that, then take this, then do that. And it's very step by step. And so, as an example, we created a project around digital PR strategy development. And we basically gave it a really long context in terms of this is how we produce digital PR strategies. Here's all the components. Here's all the ways we do our research and all those kinds of things. Then we created this really long system prompt. Then what we do in the project is we basically then record a conversation with our client, understanding what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, load that conversation in, and then the project just knows what to do with that information and spits out
Hmm.
basically a first draft in seconds, and it's like magic. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And so, to me, again, it's we need to have people better understand how to use the tools that they have at their fingertips. And
Hmm.
there's obviously some knowledge and learning and kind of intuition to your point about when to use what where. And what I tell people all the time is this stuff doesn't come with like a manual or like here's how to do this properly, right? So obviously
Yeah.
you and I spend a lot of time experimenting, trying things, right? And then we teach people kind of some basics around this, and then we encourage them to experiment and try, right? And so yeah, I mean that's kind of like I think for me, 2025 is all about this and just teaching people this kind of process of using these different tools inside ChatGPT. And again, we just picked ChatGPT because even I was in a workshop yesterday and people started asking me about all what other tools and what are and it's like no 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 like learn this. You know what I mean? This is like a whole probably 6 months to a year of work trying to figure out how to like because then it's like, okay, now how do we organize work across our entire organization so everybody's using these things consistently? And then how do we create a library of context and prompts so that there's consistency and right? Like this is a big undertaking,
Yeah.
but it's incredibly productive and it's like an incredibly good use of time if you can sort of like again think about all the different components in their individual places. And I think that the reason I wanted to say all of this in context of this agent conversation is because when we do get to a place of agents and when we have done all of this properly and when we've put in this work, our agents are going to be so much more capable of helping us, right? Do you believe that as to be a true statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that's completely missing from the ecosystem of AI adoption is a workplace where agents can thrive with humans. Where's that? No one's got it yet. Microsoft and Google are trying, but if you just go from a human perspective and try to set up a Microsoft Office 365 environment, you need to hire an administrator just to do that.
Yeah,
And that's the reality is like most businesses, 99% of businesses are small businesses, and they're not going to do that. So there's no evidence to believe that AI agents in the current environment are going to be able to just land into someone's work
right.
and know all their unique context. So it's on us to get organized, right? It's on us to clean up our office digitally so that when we do work with AI tools, it's efficient for us to engage with them. But there will be a tipping point when you're organized enough and enough of your information is digital and you've annotated and you've brought your thoughts into writing and put them in the same organizational system that like an agent could look at all of that and make sense of it and then be
Right.
productive and helpful. So that's the big thing right now. We know if the way we're using ChatGPT and the way we train people to is effective, then we would expect in the future it to be more and more effective, cost efficient, and labor like less labor intensive, which is great. But it's on us to be organized before that happens, because right now agents are still in development, so they're not waiting around for us to be organized. But
Yeah. Yeah.
fast
Well,
forward a
and
year or
what I'll say,
two,
Josh, is I think in my experience that a lot of organizations I talk to is like the knowledge exists in people's heads.
yeah,
And so it doesn't matter, you can have the most intelligent AI agent in the world, magic agent. But if the information is just in your head,
yeah,
it's not useful to any technology or any computer. And so part of it is just, having a systematized way to get the intelligence out of people's heads and the knowledge out of people's heads and sort of organize it in a way that makes sense for, first of all, for other humans. Because
yeah,
if it can make sense for other humans, it'll make sense to the AI, right? And then really to your point, laying it out and then having some data practices. So again, like I think, everybody's looking for the big, sexy, shiny thing that's going to just magically make their job amazing, and like it's not going to happen that way, right? And I know
yeah,
that all these tech bros and all these AI influencers are all promising amazing things, but they're all trying to sell you something, or they're all trying, I had a very interesting conversation actually with somebody the other day, and she was asking about, I'm not going to name the company, but there's a company that sort of has these like pre-created agents that, your HR agent and your sales agent and your blah blah blah, that what they call them. And she's like, is it any of this, like, should I be buying this? And I was like, well, why don't you just, like, actually ChatGPT can do all of this. So like, why don't you just do all of this with ChatGPT? Like, why do you need to buy some wrapper with, who knows what the data privacy is? Who knows, like, all of these things, like, and two, just because you buy this thing doesn't mean, like, you still need the information organized for those things to actually understand what to do with it. And so,
yep,
like, you know what I mean? Everybody wants this. I'm finding that everybody wants to step past all of the work that needs to be done, and it's just not going to work that way. That's just my impression of things.
totally, totally. I think back to what we've learned about SaaS for the past 20 years, and I think with the AI era and the future of AI, we hope to solve and move away from the SaaS model. SaaS model allowed for businesses to buy a solution from a tech vendor and required them to go through a custom development project just to be able to use that software. And right now, there's not a plug and play AI solution that isn't that yet. Everybody's sick of that. Like, why would I buy a HubSpot example? Why would I buy HubSpot and then have to pay a ton of money just to implement? At least that's my perspective, because I'm not a HubSpot customer and I'm not a HubSpot expert. But there's a whole industry of people that are.
There
Because
are,
and
yeah.
like same with Microsoft. Like, if I buy Microsoft Office, I need to spend weeks configuring things for my team, right? Or I need to hire an administrator to do that for me, and that's like just the same with the Google AI services. If you want to build with Google's AI, you need a team of developers to do that, just to build like internal AI automations and workflows and use their agents. And I think this is where right now the AI era is, like, we're still in this like crossover phase of people are getting away with that and companies are still buying in. But I think the AI of the future is what people are calling vertical AI agents. And I don't think vertical AI agents are going to go to market and be successful if they can't just work.
Right, right,
That's the, like, you buy software, you install it, which should be you create an account and then it connects to your data and then it works.
right.
That's where we're going. That's really what the standard, I think, is gonna be for everybody to be able to utilize this stuff. So it'll be a fascinating kind of future that unfolds before us to see if this is the promise that comes true, or if it's another round of the world is ours because we know how to build it. The world is ours because we know how to configure it. Like,
Yeah.
that's as agencies and consultants, that has been our role for a long
Well, and
time.
I
Is
do
help.
think it is going to be that for a while, Josh, because again, I think people are, I'm trying to, we're desperately trying to just get people to understand this intuitively and teach them. And,
Yeah.
many of them are interested, but also many are just like, hey, can you just do this for me? Right. And that's just, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, human nature, right? And now I'm busy, I don't have time for this. And I personally think that's the wrong approach, but, not everybody's going to do the right thing. And it's just human nature. So it is what it is. All right. So cool. Great conversation, Josh. So I think just to sum up, don't get caught up in the agent hype, because we're not there at all and we're a ways away from that. In the meantime, just learn how to use reasoning models and traditional large language models, and then, spend the time to understand how to, like, incorporate those into, like, things like projects and custom GPTs, depending on which tools you're using, gems, all the different kinds of things that you can, different ways, different names for the same thing, and learn how to use just boring old Chat GPT or boring old Gemini. I keep hearing everybody's, what are the 10 tools? And it's like, there's not 10, like, don't, like, learn one tool and learn it well. You'll be so much better off if you do that, right? And so I think to me, that is the conclusion for today. So thanks for your time, Josh. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. To learn more about the network or get involved, visit our website at tourismainetwork.com or find us on socials at Tourism AI Network. We'll see you there.